is somewhat of a two-part question, just in terms of finishing an assessment for a client. And she was just wondering how to figure out the amount of hours to recommend for a behavior technician when a formal assessment such as a VB-MAP has not been completed. Even prior to finishing the 8 hours of assessment and writing a treatment plan, her clinical director had hired a technician. And this person had felt a lot of pressure to recommend the amount of hours that he had promised, even though the technician was already hired. So I guess the two-part question is, number one, how do you recommend hours, and how do you know how many hours to recommend? And number two, is it ethical to recommend hours before doing an assessment? Whew, you want to take this one, Shira? Again, we're not, we don't have to answer to an insurance company, but if we did.
Yeah. I don't know that there's clear guidance in terms of our ethical rules about recommending hours. I find that it's really a conversation between the practitioner and the parent. Obviously when the hours are paid for, parents probably want more than less. Here we don't deal with that. So a lot of parents are paying for it themselves. And in that case, it's a conversation often having to do with finances. Sometimes I'll get parents who say like, well, you met with a kid, now just tell me, like, what do you recommend? Like as if there's a magic number, as if it's 10 hours or it's 15 hours. And that it's not really going to make a big difference. And the bottom, there really isn't a magic number. There isn't an amount. And I try not to even give them a firm number, because I really think it has to come from the parents. They have to be on board with saying, I could say to them, at this age, your child being 3 years old and never having had ABA, and this observations that I had, the more the better. There are people who do 40 hours a week. The more hours you do, the more progress you'll see, and the faster you'll see it. That's usually what I say. Parents who come in and their child might be 6 or 7 and they really don't need comprehensive ABA, needs to be more consultative. I may say something, well, 3 to 5 hours a week is usually enough, but, we're happy to kind of have the conversation as to what you were thinking. So there isn't really a magic number. I actually don't even base it on an assessment. Like I said, it's not about the BB-MAP and saying, well, I've done the BB-MAP and it shows that there's 20 boxes open. So 20 boxes equals 20 minutes per program. And now we need 5 hours a day. I tend to not do it that way. I'll obviously do an assessment, but I actually recommend the hours before the assessment very often. And again, it's based on a conversation of, what is this child's schedule? What are you willing to pay for? After meeting with the child, I usually have an idea of whether this is like a, 40-hour-a-week kid, or this is a 2-hour-a-week kid. And then somewhere in between, again, it's just, there's so many variables that there isn't a right answer. And I just will talk with the parents and see what their thoughts are.
If you look to the research in terms of early intervention talks about intensive intervention being between 20 and 40 hours a week. But when kids are older, like Shira mentioned, sometimes it's just tutoring, or it's just a consult, or it's, parent coaching instead. So I think, a lot of things that you need to look at. Number one is the age, right? If this child is young, they probably do need more intensive hours than if a child is older, and in school already. Looking at prior ABA experience, have they had ABA and have they graduated out of ABA and they just need a little booster? What else is the child doing, right? Is the child doing other things besides ABA? Or are they just playing on the iPad all day, and then going to their ABA sessions when it's time, right? Also severity of the child. But if you haven't done an assessment, you don't know that piece yet. So, like I said, if the child's young, definitely, more intensive ABA is better, according to the research as well. If they've had prior ABA experience, you need to look at what stage they're at in that, whether they're transitioning to school or whether they're older, whether they just need a booster, or if ABA wasn't, the be all and end all, right? And looking at their timetable, et cetera. And then also looking at how severe the student is, and if the student is fairly mild, then, you might just need some consultative, using a more consultative approach. But if the child's moderate to severe, you may want to structure most of the day in terms of ABA learning.
Yeah, I like that point about like, what else are they doing? Like that is a huge piece, right? Because if they're in a highly therapeutic supported program for part of the day, and ABA is a really good complement to that, then great, have them do 2-3 hours a day of ABA. If they're really doing nothing else and this is their only form of intervention, then 7 or 8 hours a day of ABA might be the better option. And again, I don't think it's any magic number or assessment that's going to reveal this number to you. I think it's really looking at the full picture and taking all of those variables into account.